Hey, Carl. Just texting you I just wanted you to know that Janine's back from her coma. She's awake, and she's asking for you. That was the text that sent shivers down my spine one peaceful Monday morning. Getting news about Janine was not exactly the type of thing I wanted first thing in the morning. I thought I'd close that chapter of my life, but I guess it was always going to haunt me. I broke up with her years ago. 2 years to the day, actually. I caught her and my best friend in a porta potty, and she tried to kiss him. I guess I couldn't blame Mike. I knew he didn't really mean any harm, and he turned her away more than a couple of times. But I did blame Janine. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I was to blame in the first place. If I wasn't so materialistic, if I was a better boyfriend, maybe it wouldn't have ended the way it did. Hi, I'm Carl. And when I broke up with my girlfriend, she drove off in such a rage that her car slid on the wet road and ended up careening into a huge tree. Now she's back from her coma, and I think she wants revenge. But before anything else, please, remember to subscribe, give a thumbs up to this video, and hit that notification bell icon to keep yourself updated on new uploads and to show your support for me. It had been very rainy that day, and the festival's grounds were so muddy, my boots sank a good inch into the ground wherever I tried to take a step. When I saw Janine bolt towards the line of porta potties in the distance, I knew exactly what was happening. I'd recognize Mike's back anywhere, and I wasn't about to let them have a moment alone. Janine was my girlfriend, sure, but I knew she didn't love me. I don't know what she saw in me, or what she wanted from me, but I went along for the ride anyway. After all, she was rich, and I aspired to be rich. She'd always liked being around Mike, and I couldn't stand that. I'm not saying it was the only reason, but it was definitely a big part of why Mike and I grew apart. It was also why I kept digging at him for being poor. I was young and immature. I was a different person back then, and when I saw the possibility that Janine might try and leave me for Mike, I simply could not give her up without a fight. She was my ticket out of that neighborhood after all. Well, turned out, despite me being a jerk to him most of the time, Mike was still a decent guy. When Janine followed him into the porta potty, he pushed her away. I heard them arguing about me through the door. But when it sounded like my then girlfriend tried to kiss Mike, I'd had enough. I threw the locked door open out of sheer anger, and Janine's once beautiful face just turned ugly to me. I felt betrayed. Looking back, I was using her just as much as she was using me. But back then, I didn't have as good a grasp on maturity as I do now. So all I felt was anger, and I took it out on her. I said some things I would never again say in my life, and Janine was devastated. I broke up with her. She lost Mike that day, and she lost me. She drove off just as the rain began to pour harder, and I was stupid and vengeful enough to let her. I heard she skidded off the road not 5 minutes from the grounds of the music festival we were at. When she got to the hospital, she was barely breathing, and then she slipped into a coma. I spent the first couple of months by her bedside. I held her hand and brought her her favorite flowers. I knew we were over, but I still cared about her well-being. It was either that, or maybe I felt a whole lot of guilt for basically causing her accident. It was probably both of those things. Janine's dad hated me. He'd always scoff at the sight of me when he'd catch me by his daughter's hospital bed. He blamed me, just as I blamed myself. And I couldn't fault him for that. So, when he told me never to see his daughter again, I did as he said. A year later, I ended up dating again. The events of my past really helped me to grow as a person. I quit my job at Janine's dad's company and started doing my own thing. With my own savings and the help of the people around me, I opened up a small food delivery service. At first, it was just me. But as the pandemic hit, more and more people began to have need of our services. I ended up hiring 5 other people to help me out. That was how I met Julie. She ordered from my app one day, and then she ordered again. Every time she did, I was always the one who got her pings. By the 5th time that I appeared on her doorstep, we both agreed it must be fate. And so, our relationship of delivery boy and customer deepened from there. Was she using me for a 10% discount on orange chicken and stir-fried rice? Definitely. She told me so. Was I okay with that? Absolutely. That Monday morning, after I'd slept over at Julie's place, I was in the kitchen making breakfast when Mike texted me. I hadn't heard from him in a long time, so when Julie called from the living room that I had a text from him, I eagerly asked her to read it for me as I flipped flapjacks and bacon. "Who's Janine?" Julie asked. "My worst nightmare?" I replied. Janine hounded us. She sent Julie threatening texts. She sent me threatening voicemails. And with Janine's ridiculous wealth and overwhelming persistence, I knew it was only a matter of time before she did exactly what she wanted to do. I decided we needed to move. And no sooner than I'd convinced Julie to do the same, did she receive a letter in the mail which came from Janine. Inside was a blank greeting card, marked only by Janine's handwriting and what looked to be dried blood. "Homewrecker," it said on the card. That really spooked Julie. So much so that she immediately left and disappeared. I only got a voicemail from her telling me that we were over. That's when I decided I needed to confront what I'd done. I knew where to find her. Janine's was the biggest house in town, after all. The moment I stepped up to the mansion's gates, they opened up. I walked up the driveway. My legs were shaking so badly. It felt like they were going to collapse from under me, halfway to the main doors. I managed the long walk, though. And before I could even ring the doorbell, the huge wooden doors swung open. Janine stood in front of me, murder in her eyes. "I was wondering when you'd finally come to visit your comatose girlfriend." She didn't even acknowledge that we'd already been broken up. But I couldn't blame her. To her, it would have seemed that what happened was in the heat of the moment, and 2 years didn't pass while she was under her coma. To her, the day she woke up was only the day after the music festival. If I were in her shoes, I'd freak too. Janine yanked me inside and pushed me onto the couch. "Sit," she commanded, as if she hadn't already forced me to. "Janine, I began, but she wasn't about to hear another word from me. "Janine what?" she exclaimed. "You don't get to talk. Your girlfriend goes into a coma and you immediately start dating someone else? You didn't even wait by my bed." "It's been 2 years, Janine," I reasoned. "And I did wait by your bed. For 2 months. I sat beside your hospital bed and held your hand, but—" "Shh! Shut it!" Janine hissed at me. "Didn't I say you don't get to talk? But it's true. I was there the whole time, but your dad. Ask your dad why I left," I blurted out. And Janine's dad, who I didn't even notice was there the whole time, began scurrying up the stairs in fear of his daughter's wrath. "Father!" Janine bellowed. The murderous intent in her eyes were back. But this time, it wasn't intended for me. The way Janine's dad ran to his room, shut the door, and double-locked it confirmed the truth of what I was saying. And Janine turned to me with a sweet, innocent smile. She always did complete 180s like that. One moment she was fierce and intense. The next, she was all cuddly and sweet. "I'm so sorry I snapped at you, babe," she said, all thought and semblance of her plotted revenge against me already and very suddenly out of the window. "I didn't know." "Well," I said, breathing a sigh of relief in the knowledge that she wasn't about to feed me to the dogs anymore. "You could have asked." That was apparently the wrong thing to say. Janine's eyes turned dark again as she exclaimed, "Well, I would've if you weren't too busy shacking up with that homewrecker." "Ah, my bad." In opening my mouth, I brought attention to the fact that we still hadn't discussed Julie. Luckily, I knew Janine long enough to know how to calm her down. "Babe," I said, "you have to understand. You were in that coma for 2 years. Nobody knew if you were ever going to come back." "So you replaced me?" she asked, her tone as high as a screeching hawk ready for the kill. "How could I ever replace you?" I said. And the moment those words left my lips, I regretted it. I should have just ended it right there and then. I should have just grown a backbone. We never really loved each other. And by appeasing her just for the sake of escaping her wrath, I was lengthening our ill-fated relationship. A relationship that ended a long time ago. Janine smiled a sweet, loving smile at me. She stroked my hair and pinched my nose as she sat on my lap. "Good boy," she said. "Now, what are we going to do about Mike?" "Mike?" I said, as if the name were foreign to me. I was afraid she was going to broach the subject, but I just hoped she'd have forgotten. Alas, she did not. Mike. Yes, Mike. The one who rejected me and pushed me away at that music festival? She said. Something must be done. He broke my heart. And as my faithful, loving, loyal boyfriend, you're gonna help me, aren't you? I'm sorry, Mike. I should have said no. I could have. But how could I when Janine had me in the palm of her hands? Of course, babe. Of course I will, I said, with regret.